mean a conflict that begins to extend itself outside of where it was initially fought, include other people that are involved, and make that part of a much larger struggle. For the people that don't know what I'm talking about, I'm saying that the war between NATO and Russia, because it's not Ukraine and Russia, it's the war between NATO and Russia, has now expanded itself into Africa. Now, some people think this is simply because of the coup in Niger. And for the people that are unaware of what I mean, Niger, which is a major country in Africa for the exportation of minerals, had a military coup. Now, why is this significant? Because in Niger, the resources that are there helps the French government, right? I said this before in some of the live that I had before, that the country that supports the most dictatorships in the world is not America, it's not China, it's not Russia, it's actually France. And it does this because it wants access to those resources. Now, the United States has an African NATO, so to speak. For the people who don't know, yes, the United States has been, for the past 10 years, cultivating a war relationship with some of the powers that are in Africa. They call it ECOWAS, right? So if you see ECOWAS, that's America's faction in Africa, right? The problem is that several members of ECOWAS have broken off from this group, right? Ghana's president, Akufo-Addo, the Congo's president, Felix Tshisekedi, Mali, Colonel Goida, Rwanda, Paul Kagame, and Uganda. Sorry, I'm not pronouncing this man's name, Mr. Museveni, right? Now, these individuals have now joined Russia in a coalition. Now, why is this important? Because the first invasion that France had into Russia was destroyed because of the supply line that was cut for Napoleon, right? So what is Russia's mentality now? It's that France and the other major powers like Germany are the ones that are really holding up Eastern Europe, right? Poland is not getting these resources from Africa on its own. It relies on France and the other Western European countries to do that. Without the lifeline of Africa, they can't afford to support the Ukraine. In their mind, the United States and NATO have said, we will support Ukraine no matter what it takes. And now the question that even some United States officials are beginning to ask themselves is, as long as it takes to do what? They're not going to regain territory from Russia. And the Russians, of course, people think this is disingenuous, that they have a different relationship with Africa than the United States all of a sudden. But let's do the math, right? The United States supported apartheid. The Russians supported the African people against apartheid. The American government and the EU have supported these really, really uneven deals that have occurred in Africa because of their companies that have been in control. Now, the question is, when did this actually begin? And this isn't really about metals in Africa. If you want to see where the fuse went off, it was about maybe a year ago. And this began in Ghana. There's these rumblings. I mean, obviously it's been going on since the beginning of colonialism, but this latest tactic began in Ghana. And I'll explain why. Because in Ghana, they have a coca plant, coca leaf, right? Business. And this is an industry that's worth over $30 billion a year, right? So the people of Ghana were saying, well, if we just refine our coca and put it on the market, not make a deal with communists or capitalists, what if I just take it to the open market, the average price for what I make, it's 30 billion. But because I'm not allowed to refine my own goods, I have to send the raw chocolate, the raw coca, to France, where their plants and their companies are going to refine it. When we say banana republic, what is the purpose of that? Why do people call it a banana republic? Well, because Central America was ruled by fruit companies. People who sold fucking fruits and vegetables here in America were the robber barons and were the life and death in Central America. They decided whether a society existed or didn't. Banana republic. We control bananas. Fuck about your life or democracy? So when you talk about a banana republic, and you hear a lot more of this from the right wing these days. Banana republic. Your people, Ronald Reagan and them, they invented banana republics in some effort to fight against communism. That didn't work. So what do we have, right? We have these candy companies that were ripping off Ghana. And the reality is this, and let's do the math here because this is important, ladies and gentlemen. We've got 600 people on here. You can do the math. If it's a $30 billion industry, right? And they're marking up 200 times the cost if they just were able to process themselves. Ladies and gentlemen, you know what that means? 30 billion divided by 200. Let's do the simple math. You remove 2 zeros. So from 30 billion, 3 billion, 300 million, cut it in half because of the 2. $150 million is what Ghana is making from its coca leaf that's turned into chocolate. But it's really a $30 billion industry. Do you know how many more people they would be able to feed? Do you know how many more industries Ghana would be able to have that it now is building now because of the idea that it said no, right? Now, we can have a long conversation about what Mr. Putin actually did. He forgave $25 billion worth of debt, but the African people made an incredible point. They say, why are we aligned with Russia? And this is important, whether you like them or not, whether you support Ukraine or Russia, just hear me out. This is what the African people said. If you haven't been paying close attention, you're doing yourself a disservice. 10 people who blindly support the Ukraine got angry and left. Fuck you. You didn't want to hear the truth? Fine. This is the reason Africans support Russia. They said, we support you because in World War II, the same thing happened to us. We were forced to fight against the Nazis, right? They said you were forced to fight against the Nazis because they invaded your home territory. They said, why were we in Rwanda forced to fight against the Nazis? Because since the British were our colonial masters, they said you better get in that boat, drive here, and you're going to fight against the Nazis or fight against the Japanese. All of the Commonwealth, as they call it, meaning Britain's colonies in Asia and Africa, they were forced to fight in World War II. They didn't want to. It had nothing to do with them. But through that struggle in World War II, they were able to gain their freedom. Why? Because the powers that be were extremely greedy, right? They wanted to keep their social colonies, right? And have access to natural resources. So what's the end result here? The end result here is that the Africans are saying, well, now let's look at how Europe started, right? The descendants of those people that are Nazis, he said, from Germany, the descendants of Nazis can go and study in France and England whenever they want. He said, but the children of the people that fought against the Nazis, that were forced to fight against them, that live in Rwanda, that live in Uganda, that live in South Africa, that live in all these other places, they get treated like criminals when they show up anywhere in Europe. And this is a very, very difficult thing to hear, but it's 100% true. So when we talk about the way that the game has changed in Africa, the Russians are now willing to offer the Africans a better price than the Chinese and the Americans. Now, is this potentially them losing money on the deal? Yes, for the first 2 years. But make no mistake, the Russians will make their money back tenfold by having a better relationship with a country that's able to make those decisions autonomously and say, no, I don't have to be pulled into a war, right? one more important thing I want to talk about, because I've heard this song lately on the internet. There's a song about killing farmers, kill the boar, right? Now, alone on its own, no one wants to hear about them killing random innocent farmers. But let me just clarify. This song is from an apartheid era, right? And just so there's some context here, the apartheid farmers used to kill people with impunity. They used to kill and shoot black children with impunity. The same way that the settlers in Israel kill people and have no consequences. As a matter of fact, the Israeli army will come and protect them. So the system of apartheid, when a white farmer killed an innocent black person, it didn't hold the farmer accountable, right? It went and defended the farmer and then told those black people, well, get off the land and all you got to leave too. So I understand the concept of where the song comes from, right? But let's have an honest conversation about what it is. That's all I wanted to say. Now, when it comes to South Africa, and when it comes to the rest of these places, why are they gravitating to Russia? Why gravitate to Russia, of all places, right? Russia has offered them $25 billion in debt relief. Russia has offered them a cultural exchange program to teach them engineering, right? Bring people to Russia to study and then have Russians go to Africa to study. This is still a much better deal than all the rest of what America has offered Africa, right? Now, I'm not talking about the people of these countries. I'm talking about the government. The government of Nigeria has been hired by the United States as a potential hitman to stop the coup in Niger. But the people, let me be very clear, the people of Nigeria have made it very clear that they do not support a war with Africans killing other Africans. Let me repeat that very clearly. The United States and NATO have pushed very hard for Nigeria to have a fight against Niger. They want them to invade. The Nigerian government was originally going to consider this. But let me be very clear. The people of Nigeria have made their voice heard and said, we will riot. We will not support this. We will not support Africans killing other Africans for your money. Now, let's be very clear about what the French deal is. The French, right, have a deal where their money is kept still in francs in a French bank, right? They have a deal where the majority of the resources have to go through their companies. All of their debt is in francs. France doesn't even use francs anymore. They use the euro, but they still make Africans use the francs that go in their bank. Now, I want to go through some statistics because people were talking about Niger and saying, oh, it's not actually, there's way more resources of uranium in other places, and that may be true. But let's talk about Africa as a whole, because when these other countries get together, right, ECOWAS is also Cote d'Ivoire, ECOWAS is Gambia, ECOWAS is Liberia, but Mali has broke off from ECOWAS. Niger has broke off from ECOWAS. Guinea, not Guinea-Bissau, but Guinea has broke off from ECOWAS. Now together, not just talking about Niger, we're talking about Africa as a continent. Well, now Africa makes up for 90% of the cobalt, 90% of coltan, 35% of uranium, right? We're talking about 2/3 of all the manganese in the world and 1/2 of the entire planet's gold supply. Do you understand what that means? Do you get that? I really hope you understand, right? Burkina Faso, someone mentioned that I should talk about Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso has come out in support of the coup against Niger. And Burkina Faso has had all of its aid cut by France. Now, when I was reading the comments in the YouTube pages, there were a lot of angry conservative people. Oh, these people, don't give them any more aid. Well, here's an ugly wake-up call. They don't want any of your aid. The African republics are saying that the aid that America and NATO gives them is not equal to 3%. 3% of the market value of the metals that they take out of the country. So I was recently in Qatar, and I had a conversation with the Muslim brothers and sisters there. And I said, you have 5 pillars of Islam. One of these pillars is called zakat. It is charity, right? But if you, my brother, and I said this to all my Muslim brothers, and I say this to you who are watching now, if your family, if you're on your deen, if you give 10 million to charity so you can get $15 million in tax breaks back, that is not zakat. That is business. Now, the people themselves, they don't know that it's not zakat. But your relationship with Allah and your relationship with God is different than theirs. And you know, right? So if you're flexing the system, so to speak, right? It's not zakat, which is what these African people are saying. This is not charity, right? We don't want you to give us this shut up money, because what you're doing is creating a much larger problem. Now, how does this tie into everything else going on in Europe? The Italian prime minister, who by herself is a hard right-wing politician, so everything these people say, even when it's right, has to be taken with a grain of salt. She came out against France and she said France and other European countries are responsible for this migration problem. Why? Because you, by tanking these other economies, have created a migrant flow that comes here. If these people had success and money in their own country, they wouldn't be coming here. Right. I find it very difficult when a person who, by and large, has said so many hateful things about immigrants and children, that they're right about this. But let's talk about why they're doing that. France is not only in a position to lose its position in Africa, but France has always been the one that supplies Italy and supplies Eastern Europe and has kept them as the junior partner in Europe. And that's exactly what Italy is. Italy has always been the junior partner. Ever since it got involved on the wrong side of World War II, it's been at the bottom of the totem pole in Europe. And they're tired of that. They think they should be at the top. Why? Because Rome is there and blah, 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 the Roman Empire. Listen, you had your chance a long time ago, Italy, to be on the right side of history. But you were on the wrong side of history. And now you have a far-right politician that's doing the same thing that Mr. Trump did, using left-wing talking points. And I had a conversation with a friend of mine the other day, and he said, oh, man, this is how I look at racism. Do I want the person that's going to be honest with me about their racism or the person who's going to lie to me? And I said, my brother, I believe that's the wrong context, right? You're framing it too nicely. Would you like to live on because you want a plantation already, right? Would you like to live on the plantation where they rape your wife in front of you, or where you find out that the baby's not yours on the day it's born? Don't make it seem nice. There's no nice option here, right? Don't try to make it a nice option. They're both horrible options. One of them is more blatant than the other. For example, look at Mr. DeSantis's laws in Florida. You have people that really are whitewashing history. So whenever I see people say, oh, that's what you get when you vote for Democrats. Well, that's what you get when you vote for Republicans. A total whitewashing of history, right? All of a sudden, slaves were like learning good skills and being positive. No, it wasn't. It was legalized pedophilia, ladies and gentlemen. Okay? So where does that leave Africa now? Well, the African Union that people have talked about for years was something that was the brainchild of not originally Muammar Gaddafi, although he carried the torch. The person who wanted an African Union was Patrice Lumumba, right? Patrice Lumumba, who was murdered by the CIA, right? Someone said, I'll take the one who showed me who they are. I'll take none of them. You can have whichever one you want, and I don't think that's a solution or a viable one. I don't want either of them. I think that what is necessary in this case, when we talk about Africa and we talk about where it's going now, the African Union was the dream of Lumumba. I believe that Africa will head towards having an African Union. And once that happens, I think that Europe is going to find out what its cup of coffee costs, right? Now, let me make something clear. I said this in the live before, okay? I said this in the live before. It's not that America and that the UK and France are turning into third world countries because of immigrants. No, that is right-wing propaganda, okay? And that's also left-wing ideology. It's just, it's a fake ideology. No, that's not the reason. No, it's not as simple as just we were here because you were there. No. Let us be very clear about what is actually going on here, okay? Without all the things that America, the resources that America and Western Europe have stolen from Africa, Asia, and Latin America, you've always been a third world country. Do you understand, England? You're an island. You're a third world country. America, you're a third world country. The 13 colonies, with all of their net revenue together, still didn't equal the amount of money that Haiti made for France. Do you understand that one island of Haiti made more money for France than all of the 13 colonies put together did for England? So before we talk about what this is coming and how this is turning into a third world country, it's because of the bad decisions that were made. Now, some people are asking, should we blame America? Is this America's fault? Well, what did America do so far? All it's done is set up a NATO in Africa. It gave them weapons. It has no plan for them. It doesn't want them to be self-sustaining. And to be fair, the Chinese have just opened 7 new mines in the southern part of the Congo. 7 new mines. Each of these mines is as big as Harlem, right? Does that mean that they're playing by the same rules? No. It's important to understand that the African Union wants to prevent there being this type of exploitation. And I think that before we have a discussion about where this is going to go in the future, I'm just letting you know that Florida is now finding out what their cup of coffee, what their cup of orange juice cost, right? When blueberries are $15, when grapes are $20, that's what happens when you get a livable wage paying to those people. As long as you have slave wages, that's the only way you can charge the prices that we have for food. Do you understand? It's not that, oh my God, liberals have messed up society. Oh, conservatives. No, take those two parties out of it. The United States of America, right? Let its companies run rampant and create laissez-faire economics. When we go to another country, we do not set up a free market. We set up a monopoly. When American companies continue to get paid to grow, what is the destiny of these American companies? To buy one another out. That's what you learned during the pandemic. They don't create a free market. They create a monopoly, right? There used to be 20 fucking supermarket chains. Now there's 3 or 4 of them, right? Used to be 400 record labels. Now there's 5 of them, major ones. So this is what I mean. So I just wanted to bring you this news. I have been discussing this with a lot of people that have just come from Africa and returning to Africa. And also, I have a lot of friends that are from Ghana. So I first heard about this and how the people of Ghana were being forced to turn their back on almost a, now, if I said 150 million and it's a $30 billion industry, let's get back to the very beginning of what I said. You're talking about leaving $29 billion on the table. Now, some people say, oh, this would change their entire economy. Maybe. Or maybe it would just be absorbed by a capitalist government that would take it and redistribute it to themselves. Just because they got paid doesn't mean that it's necessarily they're going to do the right thing. But there would be much more resources for people there. And I think that's what brings it home. But France is in danger of losing its position, not in Africa, but in Europe. It also rules over other Europeans. That's the dirty secret of Europe. Everyone thinks, oh, colonialism, they just did it to African people. Well, they did it to themselves before they did it to anyone else. That's how they perfected it, right? That's how they perfected lying. That's how they perfected duplicitousness. That's how they perfected strange bedfellows, which is making deals with enemies in order to fuck you over. Anyway, I'll take some questions if anyone has any questions that are relative to what we talked about. We're talking about the African Union, the NATO war against Russia, and now it expanding into Africa. So there was a deadline, which was last week, right? Last week was the deadline, and ECOWAS threatened Niger with military intervention. They said, we will bomb you. And the international pressure, I'm just letting you understand the international pressure from the people of Africa, from the citizens of Nigeria, from the citizens of Burkina Faso and Mali and Niger and Senegal and all these places said, we will not support a war where the United States and France are directing Africans to kill other Africans for your resources. So now that this Sunday deadline is gone, France finds itself in a very, 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 very difficult position. Okay? Now, again, Africa is not the largest oil reserve. No. Africa on a whole has about 9.8% of the world's oil. But it's the other things that are incredibly important. So like I said, 90% of the world's cobalt, half of the world's gold supply, over 65% of the manganese supply, 35% of the world's uranium, and 90% of the world's coltan. That's what Africa is giving to the world. Do you understand? And so the primary beneficiary of these resources was actually not the United States. That's why the United States formed ECOWAS. Right? The United States is not getting its cut of Africa. That's why it's there. This has been about Europe. This is what we're seeing. We're seeing Russia, right, create a new front in Africa so that the French have to worry about more than just the internal structure of their country and a few riots. They actually have to worry about them having a uranium supply. Remember, France keeps things going through nuclear reactors. That's what powers France. That's why it has less dependence on Russia for oil. But Germany was not in the same position. That's why Germany was not as willing to go to war with Russia. Also, probably because Germany got fucked up by Russia and has no desire to fuck with those people again. Okay? The last time that Russia invaded Germany, they absolutely trounced the country, ripped it in half, and made saying the word Nazi illegal. Okay? They want nothing to do with those people. But France is in a different type of mood because I always tell people the French are not soft. Okay? Everybody thinks the French are soft. Oh, they're soft. They like wine and cheese, and these people have never met a war they didn't like. The French are dangerous. I'm not saying they're bad people. They're fucking guns loaded on the fucking chopper already. Chopper already. I told you before, they never met a war they didn't like. This, right? Now Mexico is now taking over as one of the largest manufacturers that the United States does business with. It is now rivaled China, and soon it will completely overtake China as the number one in production doing business with the United States. The United States breadbasket is Latin America. Israel to the Palestinians and deal with that fallout, then I would see a South American or Central American union come into play, because that is the end of the American dollar. Do you understand? If Latin America stood up and said, no, we're not going to live in squalor anymore. You're actually going to pay what an orange should cost. It doesn't cost 0.3 cents. It costs 4 cents every orange. And now you're either going to have to pass that along to your customer, which, by the way, you always do, capitalism. You don't ever eat that yourself. You pass it on to the customer. You're going to pass that on to the customer, and then what's going to happen? Inflation, right? Now, we had a discussion about COVID plenty of times on this channel. But I want to say something. One of the things that COVID masked the most is mass inflation inside the United States. Do you understand? That's what COVID masked. It didn't mask your face. It masked the mass inflation of this country. So before COVID started, wherever you went to get a cup of coffee, it's double now. Whatever the cost was for bread, it's doubled now. And that snuck up on you, didn't it? It wouldn't have been able to happen under regular circumstances, right? You'd have been rioting in the street. Well, you weren't allowed to be in the street. People say, Immortal Technique, why is it that you seem to talk from a left-wing perspective? Let me give you a little hint. In Latin America, after the Civil War, we got a bunch of illegal immigrants coming from America. They were a bunch of really shitty people who lost a fucking war. And they wanted to implement the way they saw society in Latin America. So they came down here, talking that bullshit in the 1860s. A lot of them went to Brazil. Did you know that? Oh, you didn't know that? Yeah, after the Confederacy lost, right? After you bitch-ass motherfuckers lost, a lot of you went to Latin America. You ran to Brazil. You ran to other parts of the Amazon, where you saw white Europeans still treating indigenous people like subhumans, and you were inspired by that, right? And after World War II, we got another influx of fucking Nazis, right? You people lost the war wherever the fuck you came from. You got your asses kicked, right? You got fucked up by Russia and America, and everybody else fucked you up over there. So you came down to Latin America again, not just to Argentina, right? My father says there was a guy that they suspected of being a Nazi that worked as the director of the math school. This is a math school for military academy in Peru, and the guy's a fucking Waffen-SS dude, probably. So this is what I'm saying. I don't have to consider whatever you think is middle of the road, okay? I stayed the same during the pandemic. Still pro-Palestine. Still, hey man, you can't ban guns. It's not going to help shit, motherfucker. In terms of the economy, ladies and gentlemen, we're us pimping out other places. It's not going to help us anymore. Pro-immigrant, still been that, right? I'm sorry, I just didn't join the Trump cult. But I certainly am not out here capping for Biden. So where did I move? I stayed the same place I always been. You moved to the right. If you sitting here telling me that I became a Democrat. Haven't voted Democrat in 100 years, motherfucker. Right? It feels like it. And certainly not hanging out with those religious fanatics. Right? Those right-wing fanatics. They're not better. They're not better than the other people. Right? Being an obvious racist, that you don't get props for that. The fuck out of here. Whew. Listen, I'm going to tell you from my heart. When people talk about the border, right? The border. Some guy mentioned there's no border crisis. Yeah, there's a border crisis that was created by this country. It wasn't created by the people that are there. Now, the president of Italy is a broken clock, like Mr. Trump, a far-right politician that uses left-wing talking points to go after their enemies. Sorry, sorry to show you kids the tooth fairy's not real. But in many ways, her statement applies to Mexico too. If they weren't in such an unfair relationship with the United States, right? Then more people would have more economic opportunities there and they wouldn't be leaving. If the United States didn't sponsor the cartels, wait. Here's a question. Here's the question for the people down there talking about the border crisis. The border crisis. They're not using Russian weapons. Hey, cocksucker that was talking about the border on my live feed. What kind of weapons are the cartels using? No, tell me, motherfucker. You tell me what kind of weapons does the cartel have? Let me tell you what they had. Barrett, 50 caliber, American-made weapons. M16, American-made weapons. Come on, man. What are they using? What kind of weapons? This breaks my heart because some of y'all are Latino and you're so ignorant. You sitting here repeating right-wing talking points. You fucking coconut. What kind of weapons are the cartels in Mexico using? They're using American-made weapons. They're using Pentagon surplus weaponry from the war in Iraq. Ladies and gentlemen, I hate to destroy your narrative, ladies and gentlemen. This was done by both Republican and Democratic presidents. This was done by Mr. Obama, by Mr. Bush. This happened under all their regimes. As a matter of fact, under Mr. Obama, they wanted to dress it up pretty and they gave it a name called Fast and Furious. Come on, man. Come on. I'm not talking just to hear myself talk. This is the truth. You know, America has a cartel too. You know that, right? You know, America has a cartel. They don't have sombreros and bigotes, but they have a cartel. There are people then there, right? They have all the chemicals to make exactly what they want, and they have the protection of the state. As a matter of fact, the cartels in Colombia, Mexico, and Peru, they all aspire to be like the cartels in America. They want to be like Dwayne Reed. They would like to be like the Sackler family, right? But they're stuck being a fucking cartel, right? That's what they resent the most. They want to be entered into nice, polite society like everybody else, but you're not. And some of you are still wondering why. But when you show this to your cartel boss, you can say Exact Technique knows why they still look at you like a monkey. And they're sitting there selling the same shit you are. Smiling, sitting pretty, winning all kinds of fucking awards. And they making you take the blame. That's right. They making you take the blame. You and your culture. A friend of mine once said there's no such thing as a government. It's just people that rule over other people. I love you guys, man. I appreciate this conversation that we've had. I'm going to save this live. And I'm going to post it specifically about the NATO versus Russia issue that's going on now. Peace to everybody in the chat. Oh, good to see everybody showed up. So, in a sense, France is going to have a huge part of its natural resources cut off. The African countries have complained about several things having to do with both the Biden and the Trump administration, but they're less focused on the United States and they're more focused on NATO, right? This is a war between NATO and Russia. This is not a war between Ukraine and... If this was a war between Ukraine and Russia, this would have been over months ago. This is a war between NATO and Russia, which is why Russia has now angled all of these African countries that have found themselves in a terrible negotiation with Europe. And they're saying, we don't want to support you for these prices anymore. We don't want to give you 2/3 of the world's manganese, 35% of the world's uranium, 90% of the world's coltan, 90% of the world's cobalt, 90% of the zinc. It's just insane. And so the governments that were aligned with BRICS have left the sphere of ECOWAS's influence, even though they're still a part of it. And what they're doing is France tried to get Nigeria to invade Niger, right? Nigeria and Niger, Niger, right? But they had a massive blowback from the people of Nigeria and of the people of Burkina Faso, the people of Ghana. They have spoken, and they say that they refuse to kill other Africans for France's resources. Okay? This is the news. If this war expands into Africa, ladies and gentlemen, we're in World War III. The definition of a world war is a conflict that originates in one place that then expands to several other places. If this war is in the Ukraine and now it expands to other places in Belarus, and then it expands to Niger, to Nigeria, to Burkina Faso, ladies and gentlemen, we're in a fucking world war. Do you understand that? Then it's only a countdown to when someone uses a fucked up weapon, something that can't be taken back. A biological weapon, a chemical weapon, or a nuclear weapon. Take your fucking pick, but it's gonna happen. If this continues and if war breaks out in Africa, I guarantee you they're going to be some type of illegal weaponry that's not supposed to be used, but they're going to test it out there because these people are sick and they'd rather have that happen there than happen in the Ukraine. But it's going to continue to happen. Now, you guys can talk about the causes. Why did this happen? Why this happened? Why that happened? Look, I'm not interested in that. Why? Because both of the sides that I've listened to very carefully, I've listened to the Ukrainian side very carefully, I've listened to the Russian side very carefully. These people will never agree. They are farther apart from each other than conservatives, than a hard conservative or a hard liberal are in this country. They are far, if you can imagine that, they're much farther apart from each other than these people. Okay? They don't even have a shared history. I mean, in DeSantis's Florida, the whitewashing is going on now. So maybe that'll be the case there. But these people don't have a shared history. Do you understand? Their idea of how this entire thing started is totally different. The Russians think that NATO expanded into the Ukraine. The Ukrainians think that the Russians fomented a regime change and lied in an election, and therefore they needed to overthrow that democratically elected government. So whether you believe in the Ukrainian cause or not, they did foment a regime change with the help of the United States. Now, in their mind, they weren't doing anything wrong. In their mind, they were correcting an error that the Russians started. In Russia's mind, with the help of the United States, because the assistant Secretary of State was handing out sandwiches on the voting line. A member of another country. Imagine that. Listen to me. Just listen. This is what makes the Russians pissed off. Imagine this. Imagine if an official from China, like, take seriously. It doesn't matter if you're a liberal or a Republican, Democrat, anything. Just hear me out, please. Imagine if an official from China was handing out sandwiches on a line to vote for the president of America. What would you think? Somebody from the official government of China was sitting there handing people shit like, oh, I hope you vote for this person. What would you think? I know what I would think. I would think, man, they got a dog in this fight. They're trying to fuck me over. Well, it's not little sandwiches that make them mad, ex-peace. I mean, it doesn't matter. I get it. You support the Ukraine, but that would look funny, right? If we had Chinese officials. How about this? Let's say it was Russian people. Russian officials were sitting there giving sandwiches to people saying, I hope you vote Republican so we can end this war in the Ukraine. You would think it was fucked up. And I know you would. So that's how the Russians see it. I'm not interested in how the Russians and the Ukrainians see it, because they're never going to see it the right way, right? But I do know this. They're never leaving the Crimea, okay? Never. If Zelensky thinks that they're going to go into these negotiations with the hope of getting the Donbass, Luhansk, and the Crimea back, those places are gone. Do you understand? All right. Someone said a good peanut butter and jelly sandwich is undefeated. Okay. What are my thoughts on RFK Jr.? He had some really interesting things to say at first, and then I saw that he was totally unwilling to engage Mondo Weiss in a conversation about Israel and Palestine, and I was really disappointed. I mean, I think he's a great guy. I think he has some brilliant ideas about some stuff, but I think he's totally out to lunch and may even be controlled opposition when it comes to Israel and Palestine, because he doesn't seem to have any semblance of understanding about something that a politician who's running for the presidency of the United States should really have a policy on, but seems to have none besides, oh, I hope it all works out. Yeah, I'm sorry. That's a no for me. Do you think Bukele can unionize Central America? No. Most other Latin American governments see him as a joke. They see him as an authoritarian figure from the center-right that's never going to run anywhere else. Do you understand that? It's not something that's coming out of anywhere. No. Someone said Diego Sands said he would pick Killer Mike as VP. Yeah, I know Killer Mike. I'm sure they're cool, but Killer Mike is a huge supporter of Palestine. I don't know why he would do that without having a conversation with him about that. Okay. Why do people still run a third party in the United States? Some people say that a third party will always be the future of the United States. It's an old joke. Latin America will have a union. Hard to say. I mean, the last few people that tried it got killed. But I think that if Africa has a union, right, it will inspire other places to do the same. If West Africa creates a union, right? Because remember, let's have an honest conversation. People are mentioning BRICS, right? BRICS. You know what BRICS was? It started out as BRIC, right? Brazil, Russia, whatever. It was like a memo by Goldman Sachs, apparently, to describe these places. And these people did some hip hop shit, took the wackest shit and made it better. So BRICS was originally an economic idea, right? It's not like NATO, right? It's not like Russia's NATO. That's what people are confused about. BRICS is not Russia's NATO. BRICS is more like Russia's personal G7, where countries get to just come and have conversations and open dialogue, open markets, right? It doesn't automatically mean that they're in a military alliance. That's what people don't seem to understand. Okay? So just let's be real about what BRICS is. It started out as a memo in Goldman Sachs. Please look it up. Yeah, I know y'all don't have to believe me. That's how it started. And then they added a series of other BRICS. They added Saudi Arabia. Oh, an S. Brazil, Russia, was it India, China, and then Saudi Arabia. Do you understand? It's not like the antithesis to the UN. It's not like the evil to the super friends. It's literally just their area where it's an economic forum. It's not a military it's not a military alliance, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. Saudi Arabia, South Africa. Yep. Okay. This is the last question I'm going to take. My opinion on the Western Sahara and South Africa. South Africa said that it supports Russia because during apartheid, the United States supported apartheid. And Russia, at that time, which was the USSR, supported their liberation. So that's why they side with Russia now. It's hard to argue with that because unless you ever lived under apartheid, how could you support the people that supported that, right? So when it comes to South Africa, and I appreciate that, yeah, I made the correction, those people that are asking me, that said, oh, you said Saudi. No, I meant Saudi. I meant South Africa, but I appreciate the correction and I stand corrected. Thank you so much. But what is important, right? What is important is that Africa finds itself at a crossroad now, right? Africa is at a crossroad. If it continues to be more independent, I think there will be some kind of military intervention, or there'll be rebels that pop up, or you may get ISIS. Listen, Muslim fundamentalists, if they pop up in your country, there's a good chance the CIA sent them, you know? Do you understand? Oh, by the way, you know the Taliban attacked Iran over some river in Helmand province. And there was some freak on YouTube that said, oh, this has nothing to do with the CIA. I'm so tired of some of these misinformation channels, these propaganda channels, these U.S. propaganda institutions that exist on YouTube, right? And now they have a new movie about Golda Meir, the woman prime minister of Israel. And it was interesting because in there, now she is from the Ukraine, but they had to bring that up. You see how they bring it all home? See, I had this conversation with RT and the Russians years ago. I said, you're losing the war for people's hearts and minds. Not because you don't have any more news stations like RT. No, not because you don't have any more right-wing news outlets to counter liberalism. No, fools. That's not why you're losing. It's because everything about American propaganda is cooked into the sauce. It's not something you can see anymore. It's sliced so thin, right? Like the garlic in Goodfellas, that it melts into the sauce in the pan, right? And they're going to talk about how bad the Russians were to Ukrainians, and that's why they all went to Israel to find quote-unquote freedom, but they're not going to talk about stealing other people's lands. I appreciate all your time. Tell me where you're from. I'll give you guys a shout out. I'm going to get out of here. It's time for dinner. But I appreciate the love and thank you for having 600 people in here the whole time. It's the most I've had in a long time, and I appreciate the love and the support. ImmortalTechnique.com is where you can get the merchandise. Rebel Army Records is the only place you can get anything of Immortal Technique. I'm nowhere else. I started my own thing. I'm even more independent than I was before. There is no such thing as a minor attracted person. You're a pedo and you're a sicko. And in America, that used to be legal under slavery. Just don't forget that. It wasn't unique opportunities that conservatives gave black people to get their shit together and become blacksmiths like they're trying to whitewash in Florida. No. Slavery was legalized pedophilia and rape. So let's not play about what the fuck we're dealing with here. Okay. Big shout out to New York. Shout out to Riverside, California. Blue Ridge, Georgia. Georgia in the building. Harlem. Harlem in the building. Good to see you, man. San Bernardino, Germany. The Bay Area. Oxnard. Reno, Nevada, Australia. Chicago. Ooh, shout to Utah. All my indigenous people up there. Toronto. Karachi, Pakistan. England. G-Rep in the building. Nowlands. Miami. Dallas, Texas. Love you guys. South Africa's in the building. Love you. Charleston, South Carolina. The UK. East Los. Appreciate you guys. I love you. I'm definitely going to save this live. Take care. Peace.